What's up, everyone? It is yet another DNVR Rockies emergency pod brought to you by New Built Construction. When that home emergency hits, New Built Restoration and Construction will be there at nubilt.com or 720-903-4254. Let them know that DNVR sent you. I think this is the second emergency pod we've done, Spencer, in the last 7 days. It doesn't feel real. I feel like I'm living in the clouds right now. This is pretty wild.
No, when we were considering doing one for like a Troy Johnston, it was getting bleak and it was like, all right, we just need something. And now, you're just sitting here and all of a sudden it's like, all right, let's fire this up in the next 5 to 10 minutes, I guess.
And
but for good reason.
And technically we could have had 3. We didn't do one for Jake McCarthy because it happened at like 10 o'clock at night and you and I were both in bed and like done with our day. So yeah, it's a good problem to have for Rockies fans. We're not normally used to this, but the Rockies reportedly, according to Jorge Castillo, reporter, I believe for ESPN, the Rockies have signed Willi Castro to a 2-year deal. You said you found the number, the amount that he was signed for. You said it was what, $12.8 million for 2 years?
Yep. 2 years, $12.8 million.
Okay.
So 6.4 a year for a former all-star, basically one season ago, not last season, but the season before that. And a guy that got traded in the middle of last year, 6.4. It's perfect. And all of these signings, the same kind of guys, they're just guys that are good players or have been good players, but maybe on a little bit of a cheaper option right now at this moment because of how their 2025s went.
Yeah, so I'm going to probably make this comparison a lot throughout this this show and probably as we spend the rest of the offseason talking about Castro. But I think there are a lot of similarities to Thairo Estrada. Now, there are a lot of differences. Don't get me wrong. It's not that they're not the same guy by any means, but the contract is relatively similar, although this is a 2-year deal. Thairo Estrada had a 1-year deal for $4 million that had a player option for $7 million the following year, which obviously wasn't picked up. But so it's a similar structure to the Thairo Estrada deal. But the situation with Willi Castro, I think, is a little bit different. He's a utility man. He brings you more depth, and Spencer, like you just said, it's similar to some of the other moves that we've seen the Rockies make so far with Michael Lorenzen, Jake McCarthy. It's a guy who is coming off of a relatively down year, but still has a lot of upside. Not entirely old. He's 28 years old. And I think the interesting thing for Willi Castro, if you're comparing him to, let's just say, Thairo Estrada, since that happened last year, Thairo Estrada was coming off of back-to-back down years, albeit with some injuries, but he had basically 2 seasons where he was not playing at the level that he was supposed to be playing at. Willi Castro was an all-star in 2024. And last year, yes, he had a down slope. His 34 games I think he played with the Cubs were not ideal. But I think if you're comparing, what happened with Thairo Estrada to what's the situation is with Willi Castro, I think it's just important to look at the fact that there's more upside. There's more potential for Willi Castro to be good and to have that bounce back season like we saw with Mickey Moniak or like we saw even with Jimmy Herget, because it was just one bad year. And it was truly just 34 games that he played with the Cubs that were pretty suspect. And the rest of it has been top tier, at least elite level baseball at times. So I'm optimistic. I think this is, if nothing else, another Jake McCarthy. But I think it's a start. It's a good move for the Rockies infield. Yeah.
And now you really wonder, as we talked about on our show on Tuesday, you really wonder what the plan is for Tyler Freeman. Now you're gaining a super utility infielder here. Willi Castro is not going to play in the outfield at all, but Willi Castro can play second base. He can play shortstop. He can play third base. So it's an interesting pickup from that realm because, like I said, and I said this on Twitter, I'll have to eat my take. It's lasted for a good 48 hours. that Tyler Freeman would be your starting second baseman, but have the opportunity to play in the outfield or play short or play third, depending upon whatever happens. And now it basically Willi Castro is going to come in and be your starting second baseman. And all these deals, it's the same exact thing. It's 2 years. 12.8 is, that's a healthy number. The Rockies paying a guy $6.4 million to come in and be a veteran starter in your lineup every single day is nothing to scoff at from Rockies news. And this guy was like you said, didn't have a great 34 games with the Cubs in 2025, but he was a trade deadline piece that, when Minnesota was just selling off everybody they had, apparently, he was part of that a playoff team went and got Willi Castro. And so they thought that much of him. And if you look at his 23 and 24, had pretty damn incredible years and was an all-star in 2024. So I'm hopeful, but it's also, this is not like if we were doing an emergency pod if we were working the Rockies, the DNVR Rockies beat when Chris Bryant got signed, right? You're expecting Chris Bryant, you're paying him $180 million or whatever it is, and you're expecting a guy that's going to be in your lineup for 4 or 5 years and hit 30 to 40 home runs. And of course, when we look at anybody as Rockies fans, Rockies media, we expect their numbers offensively to go up when they get here, right? When they get to Coors Field, we expect if you saw a guy hit 10 home runs last year in a full season where he's healthy, in Coors Field, you can expect 14 to 15 with him playing 81 games at home. So we kind of inflate those numbers in our head a little bit, but this isn't, if this guy's not good, guess what? It's a 2-year deal and he's gone in 2 years and you're free and clear. None of these deals are the 7-8 years where we're going to be looking down the road like we are right now, looking in the rearview mirror with the Chris Bryant deal and thinking, what happened here? If it doesn't work out, it's very low. Every move they're making is extremely low risk.
Yeah. Scott, I know you were a little concerned, or not concerned, that's the wrong word. You were, you said you didn't understand it when you were on Twitter. And I understand, to be completely honest with you, Spencer and I were just joking about it before we jumped on the show. We were saying, who would have thought the last 2 moves that the Rockies made were for an outfielder and a second baseman utility guy, right? Like you kind of already had those 2 positions or those 2 like guys kind of lined up. But I want to look at it this way. Our friends over at Blake Street Banner, Isaac actually had a good write-up on the potential for Willi Castro. He said this: during Castro's stint with Minnesota, which was 2023 through halfway through 2025 when he got traded to the Cubs, he had a 107 WRC plus and a 6.5 FWAR across 368 games. The last Rocky to put up those kind of numbers was CJ Cron from 2021 halfway through 2023. He'd be a great addition to the team, right? So the potential is there. And I think what Paul DePodesta, because it was funny, I was actually on the phone with Paul DePodesta as this move came down the pipeline. And I think it was Kevin Henry who asked Paul straight up when we saw it. I was actually texting Kevin and Noah and like all of the media because I don't think a lot of people had seen it yet. So I'm like texting Kevin, like, look who the Rockies reportedly just signed. So Kevin actually asked Paul the question about this. And Paul was like, yeah, I can't really speak on that right now because the deal hasn't been confirmed by the team. But he kind of talked around it and basically said, look, we need guys who have been big league players. We need guys who are going to make the young guys, which we've heard time and time again, earn their spots. And so he was like, we're definitely looking, we're actively pursuing veteran / prime infield positions. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a first base and maybe even a third base signing by the Colorado Rockies that mimics the Willi Castro situation, where you would end up putting a little more pressure on Kyle Karros and Blaine Crim and those kind of guys who are on the cusp to say, hey, we're going to send you guys back down to the minors, and then you got to really earn it because we've got some big leaguers that are taking up some innings up here.
Yeah, exactly. And now after this signing, I think we're getting a little bit of a taste of this, and it's just going to continue to grow where they are going to get players that are going to be at the major league level. And that doesn't help us 4 or 5 years down the road necessarily. But at the same time, all of these guys are on that relative young enough age where if they do become a good player, it's either a flip at the deadline or it's a sign long-term where it's like, he's not 34 now, going to be 37, 38 when you expect this team to contend. These guys are 27, 28 years old where they're going to be in their early 30s when it's time to hopefully contend for a playoff spot with what the Rockies are building and have in their pipeline and coming up through their system. Shout out Nightwing, new to the channel, Rockies fan from New Jersey. My brother lives in Morristown, New Jersey, so he's also a Rockies fan. Well, we're getting him back to Rockies fandom. But yeah, this is a great move. I think this is, and we have a question here, like, do we trade Amador now? And I think it's just a perfect example of Amador just goes back to AAA. And
I think you do, personally.
Yeah, no, I would be okay with that too. But I think, yeah, it's Amador and guys like that now. You're like, okay, everybody in the Rockies clubhouse currently, as of, every player as of today, like the Ryan Ritters and the Tyler Freemans and maybe Amador thought, okay, I'm going to be starting potentially opening day. Now, one of those guys, with this guy being a non-designated second baseman, shortstop, third baseman, he's obviously not going to play shortstop if Tovar's healthy. But you have now both of those guys are like, holy shit, okay, I have serious competition at my spot. And that doesn't, these are professional athletes. They're all great at what they do. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to try harder or be better. Like, you can't just be better. You got to work to be better. But they know now that they have to put in some serious work in front of the coaching staff, in front of the new, whether it's the pitching staff or, the hitting staff. They have to put good shit on tape in order to be on the major league roster coming out at the end of March when the Rockies head down to Florida to play their first series. It's no longer like, oh, well, nobody else is here, so I guess I'm the starting this guy. It's like, all right, now we presume that Willi Castro will be that guy, but now there's going to be a serious battle going into training camp that we get to, follow along. And this is a guy with some, a good history, played for some good teams, was a Cub in the playoffs last year, so I'm pumped about this. I think it's just a perfect move for where the Rockies are at. And none of these moves are like, have us sitting here shaking our heads. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no. And to answer Lux's question in the chat, do we still plan to sign another starting pitcher? That was, I think, the first question that Paul was asked when we were on that call with him just a second ago. And he said, absolutely. Right. He was pretty adamant that he's like, first of all, he's like, we're all looking, all 30 teams are looking for starting pitchers, but he was like, we can never have enough. So he's like, every day we're having conversations with teams. We are open to signing a starting pitcher, another starting pitcher, and beyond that. So I do think that's something else that we could possibly see. But he really did emphasize infield, and it is funny that we then saw Willi Castro, reportedly sign with the Rockies literally right after he said that. But he did emphasize that the infield was their focal point right now, trying to just booster that up. And like I said, I could see a world in which we have almost a brand new infield, a new third baseman, obviously Tovar at shortstop, and Castro probably at second base, and someone new at first base. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw something like that. And look, I've been saying time and time again this offseason that, hey, look, I'm happy that the organization is changing. I'm happy that we've, seen this front office look completely different, get an overhaul. But I was my first prediction in our 26 predictions for 2026. I still think the Rockies are going to lose 100 games. Now, I'm not saying that Willi Castro and Jake McCarthy are going to all of a sudden make this a playoff team. But if the Rockies sign 2 or 3 more guys that are similar to the Michael Lorenzen, Jake McCarthy, Willi Castro kind of level, I feel like there's a world in which they could surprise us, right? Again, I'm not saying that they're going to make the playoffs or anything like that, but this becomes a brand new team in 2026. And we asked Paul, I don't remember who it was on the call that asked Paul, hey, how long do you think it was? I think it was Renee Detcher with Purple Row asked, how long do you think it's going to take until this team can be competitive again? And he, was relatively realistic, but he also was like, we expect it to be now. Like we know that it's a long way to go before we can get, to competing with teams like the Dodgers and stuff like that. But we expect to take leaps and strides forward in the win category this year in 2026. And the moves that he's made, while they won't set the world on fire, I think they've been good. They've been very good. And I think, you make a couple more of those moves and there's a realistic chance that some of these could actually hit and we could see this team look a heck of a lot better than they did in 2025. Yeah,
just some capable MLB players where they could be good, they could be bad, but you don't have a question mark on them of like a total wait and see. You know what Willi Castro can be. You know what Jake McCarthy can be. Can they return to that? That's the hope, and that's why you bring them in at a low-cost deal, because there's some risk involved in terms of them just turning out to not be a good player or not be the player that they once were in McCarthy and Willi Castro. In the last couple of years have been, McCarthy Rookie of the Year votes and Castro being an all-star. I don't necessarily expect him to be an all-star again this year at second base, but at the same time, you're not paying him, you're not giving him a 5-year deal for $40 million, $50 million where you expect him to be the level of player that you're paying for. You're either getting a good deal at a low cost, or you're letting him walk after 2 years because he wasn't the guy that you thought you signed, just like Thairo Estrada was not last year.
Yeah. And look, I know we've talked about this a lot, but Mickey Moniak has kind of become the poster child for the Colorado Rockies and their organizational design and what they hope their future can look like. They kind of have created this place where they say, hey, Mickey Moniak, he was a first overall pick. He had all of this upside, but he just wasn't hitting his potential on his teams before that, with the Angels and I think he was with the Phillies, right? With his teams that he was at prior to the Rockies. We brought him over to the Rockies. We took a lot of that pressure off of his shoulders, and he just went out and had a great season. Same thing with Jimmy Herget. Jimmy Herget was in the exact same boat. The Rockies do have some success stories, despite losing 119 games last year, where you can point to and say, those guys were signed for very cheap, had big upside, and they played into that. And so I think you see the Jake McCarthy, the Willi Castro, and then also the Michael Lorenzen deal, and you say, and I think less so the Lorenzen deal, but definitely the Jake McCarthy and Willi Castro moves, and you say, these are moves that have the potential to be your Mickey Moniaks. And if you told me that we could add 2 more Mickey Moniaks, theoretically, to this roster in 2026, this team takes a big step forward. Again, not a playoff team, but they definitely look significantly more competent if you put 2 more Mickey Moniaks on the team in 2026 than you had in 2025. So I know baseball isn't linear like that. It's not as black and white, but theoretically on paper, that's what the Rockies are betting on. They're betting on, hey, we've put all these new coaches in place. We've put this new organizational philosophy in place that we can help get the most out of these players. And now we're going to go sign these cheap players who have big upsides, big potential, and we're going to get the most out of them, and we're going to turn them into, legitimate players.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually wanted to ask you, because when we were setting this emergency, Jesus, I don't know why I can't say emergency show. It's just a tongue twister, apparently. So you were on a call with DePodesta, and I didn't know that. So I was like trying to hit you up, and then you're like, hey, I'm on the phone with Paul right now. I'm like, okay. But so was that essentially to announce the Lorenzen signing, or to talk about that? Was that what that was for?
Yeah, it was weird. And the reason I didn't even say anything about it is because it came up this morning. I just got a text from the Rockies PR team, and they were like, hey, we're doing a call today at 1 p.m. with Paul DePodesta and at 3 p.m. with Michael Lorenzen. So when the PR team kind of introduced the call, they were like, hey, this is just for you guys to talk to Paul about some of the recent moves, right? The Rockies have made 3 or 2, Michael Lorenzen and Jake McCarthy, 2 official moves in the last week. And so, we'll give you guys a chance to ask some questions about that. So yeah, that was kind of what that was all about. But then at 3 p.m. today, so in an hour, we're supposed to be jumping on a call to talk to Michael Lorenzen. I'm not going to be able to do that because I got to go run out to a broadcast this afternoon. So I'm a little bit bummed that I just got to talk to Paul and not Michael. But either way, I did want to switch gears real quick. I've seen a lot of questions on the who gets cut from the 40-man roster. We just saw Bradley Blaylock, my guy, my Lord and Savior, Bradley Blaylock. Finally, the end of an era for him. So a sad day for me. But who gets released now? Okay, we've got once Willi Castro's move gets finalized. Is it Amador? Is it? I mean, how do you approach that? I think it's got to be Amador, right? Or do they go for Chris Bryant? That's what I keep telling myself they're going to do.
Yeah, it could be one of the pitchers as well. I mean, there's a few guys here that I'm looking at that you just don't like. Garrett Acton, don't even know. Like, I know Garrett Atkins, but I don't know Garrett Acton. That's a pitcher that's apparently on the Rockies 40-man roster. Jeff Criswell, there's a few.
I forgot about him. He was hurt. he was like around the team last year. He was in the clubhouse every time I was there. And I think he had Tommy John or something like that, but he was there. I remember Chris well.
Yeah, and you're not dropping, Amador makes sense, I guess, a little bit. He's a little scary to DFA because he is a switch hitting second baseman that was a high prospect for a long time and never really figured it out at the bigs, but also you could be made the argument that he didn't get enough time. And I don't think Krim is the next one because, like another comment said, Krim is really your only, on the roster first baseman you have right now. There's only 5 infielders on the 40-man roster. Now, granted, we've heard Troy Johnston's going to play first base, or that's an option for the Rockies to have at first base. But I don't think that I think it's probably just a pitcher at this point. And unless you go get a Nathaniel Lowe or somebody like that that's actually going to play first base, I don't think you get rid of Johnston or Krim at this point because you've got a right-handed hitting and a left-handed hitting first baseman at that guys that can play first base, unless there's some plan down the road.
I think it's got to be Amador, and I agree with Dinger's burner. I mean, he just hasn't shown you anything in the last couple of years. Even in the minors, he hasn't really done what you've kind of expected him to do. So I think it's got to be Amador, but yeah, we'll see. And to answer Stray Flick, I see you say the PR team is the team that contacts you. It's the PR team. They're called the PR team. They're just the communication staff. They're the ones who coordinate all the interviews. They're like our point of contact. I wish I could say I could just call up Paul DePodesta anytime, but if I want to talk to Paul DePodesta, I got to call the PR team or the communication team, and then they get me in contact with Paul and the rest of the guys. But yeah, but going back to what we were saying though, yeah, it's got to be Amador, in my opinion, or a pitcher. But I think the Rockies are in a place right now where you can actually be a little bit picky. Like you can actually, for once. Again, despite losing 119 games last year, you can actually kind of sit there and say, yeah, we can actually be a little bit picky about who we let go of. And there's reasons for that. And Bradley Blaylock, for example, he had to be the pitcher that got cut, right? He was the worst pitcher on the team last year, and you just don't have a spot for him anymore. So you move on, right? And that's just the way it goes.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that Paul couldn't speak on it when, it's just the messed up nature of professional sports in general. There's a lot of players that find out they're traded by the Woj bomb or the Shams bomb or whatever. Like it's just kind of how sports go right now. And even with the Rockies, and this could be a dig at the Rockies. I'm not sure, I haven't paid attention to the other teams' main pages, but we knew the Lorenzen deal. We did the podcast 3 days ago and they finally announced it officially today. So I don't know if there's other things going through that take a long time, and that's why Paul couldn't speak on it. But I do find it actually quite hilarious that you're on the call with him, and he not only, on the call with him, ironically, while they're signing maybe the biggest free agent of the offseason for them up until this point in a former All-Star, but then he can't comment on it. Josh Burns is working the phones, doing whatever. But all these random guys on Twitter are like, yep, it's 12.8 over 2 years. Yep. Willi Castro to the Rockies and all this stuff. And he's like, well, I don't know. I'm gonna have to wait till the Rockies PR update tweet comes out. And then I can talk about it.
I do think a lot of it is just contractual, right? It's making sure that the organization has a chance to, get their graphics put together. And I mean, it's a lot of BS if we're being completely honest, but it was funny because when Kevin Henry brought it up to Paul seemed genuinely shocked that the news had come out. Like he kind of not shocked, like, oh, I hadn't heard that, but kind of like, oh, didn't think it would get out that fast type of thing. So it was pretty funny to see him react live time to that and him kind of process like, should I say something? Is there a way to say something? And eventually he was like, no, I'll just say no comment on this. Like, I don't think I'm supposed to say anything. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that we just aren't privy to, and I try to remind myself that sometimes because I think it's knee-jerk reactions to moves and deals that are made or rumors and all that kind of stuff that there's so many moving pieces for better or worse behind the scenes that are happening at the same time. But yeah, I hope it doesn't take as long as the Lorenzen deal to become official, because the Lorenzen deal took over a week.
Yeah, I think that it was official today, and we did the emergency pod on Wednesday night-ish,
Yeah.
I think, last week. So, yeah, hopefully it's not. Maybe we'll get Willi Castro at Rockies Fest next Saturday.
I doubt that. That would be fun, though.
That's
Okay.
part of his contract. Hey,
Last
we have this
question.
Rockies Fest.
Yeah. Yeah, right. All right. Last question before we wrap this up, because both Spence and I got to go. But what's their next signing? You asked me last emergency pod, who's the next position, or what's the next position that gets signed? I don't remember what answer I had given.
I think you said starting pitcher.
Okay, yeah, and that tracks. What do you think now? What do you think? Is it another infielder? Is it a starting pitcher? Who do you think gets signed next?
Well, now the thing is there's two ways to look at how they're signing guys. One, it's like, okay, they're signing guys, which means they're having a lot of conversations, and some of these are actually coming to fruition, and you're getting guys to come to one of the worst, as of last year, the worst major league clubs in the history of baseball with a 162 game season, probably paying them a little bit more than they would need to be paid other places. But I also know, as a Rockies fan, and this is changing a little bit, they're starting to run out of money at some point. Like, they can't keep doing this. You know what I mean? Like, it's like that meme. You can't keep doing this. Like, these are great to see, and they're connecting on some of these pitches, essentially, that are players that are coming in. But I know now, with another $6.4 million out there this year, even though Drew in the comments says keep the Arise dream alive, and I want to say it's going to be a first baseman, I think it's got to be a starting pitcher, and it's got to be a starting pitcher at $3 to $4 million a year. I don't see them spending another, let's say 10. I think 10, whether that's two players or one player, if they go get a guy for $10 million, $20 million over 2 years at first base, fine. But I think after signing Lorenzen and giving him 8 and signing Castro and giving him 6.5, basically, that's $14 million that you didn't spend a week ago. So, and we know that, there's no exact numbers to it, but I would guess probably 20 to 25 is going to be their budget for free agent / trade. So I wouldn't imagine it's going to be another even sizable name like Willi Castro or a $6 million plus deal. It'll probably be somebody in the $3 to $4 million range.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I'd be curious to know, I mean, wouldn't we all, what their actual budget is? That would give us so much insight into, what they have to work with and stuff like that. I would guess that I would guess that the Monforts, given how poor of a season they had last year, I would actually venture to guess that they probably have given them a little more wiggle room. They're saying, hey, when your business is failing, sometimes you got to reinvest more money into that sometimes to fully jumpstart it, give it a little more energy, a little more juice to get it back up on its feet. So I don't think it's crazy to think that they might have a little bit more money than what we would be expecting them to. But you're right. They're definitely not signing anything in the ballpark of a Chris Bryant deal again anytime soon. So I think it'll be
this comment's hilarious too. Because now it's like we've talked about this kind of jokingly that Chris Bryant's hampering our free agency, but now it's starting to feel like he legitimately is now. That we're 100%. Actually getting, instead of just, the Rockies were in talks, but he signed somewhere else for more. The Rockies were in talks with this guy, but he signed somewhere else for more. No, they went and got Lorenzen, they paid him. They went and got Castro, paid him. So now you're legitimately looking at Chris Bryant and being like, hey, buddy, it's time to figure this out.
Yeah, and Purple World Order, I totally get where you're coming from. And that also could be very much true. I just think in the conversations that we've had, both on the record and kind of off the record too, with Walker and Paul and them, it sounds like they're very open to investing in this team here and now, starting today. So that's just kind of the vibe I've gotten. But you're totally right. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, Dick Monfort, we know what side of the argument he's on when it comes to the work stoppage and the labor dispute and all of that kind of stuff. So that could definitely be playing into this as well. But either way, they're not going to go make a huge contract. They're not going to go sign a huge contract. And unfortunately, no matter what Chris Bryant does or what happens to Chris Bryant, they're stuck with that for a long time, no matter what, unless they can defer some of those payments down the road, like you saw with Rendon. I will say, though, I just learned this the other day from our good friend Kevin Henry, that apparently the Rockies are no longer paying Nolan Arenado. Apparently 2025 was the last year that the Rockies were paying Nolan Arenado. So they are out from underneath paying Nolan Arenado to play for the Cardinals. Now it is just the Cardinals paying Nolan Arenado to play for the Diamondbacks.
Yep, another team just paying for him to play for somebody else.
Yeah, so I know
makes us not feel as bad.
I know they got a little bit more to work with, but all right. Bo Spence and I got a dip. Thank you guys for watching. We will have plenty more to talk about on our show next week. Maybe even another signing. Maybe even another rumor comes down the pipeline, and we'll have some more stuff to talk about. So this has been good. FanFest is going to be next week. I'm going to be there. Spence is going to be there. It's going to be a good time. So hopefully we'll see you there. And if not, we'll see you guys on the show. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
We all silly like the mayor.